모두를 위한 버추얼 프로덕션, AI와 실시간 제작 기술이 바꾸는 콘텐츠 제작의 미래를 주제로 강연을 해주시겠습니다. A.J.Wedding님은 스토리텔링과 최첨단 기술의 교차점에서 엔터테인먼트 산업의 혁신을 일으키고 계신 인물인데요. 오비탈 스튜디오의 창립자이자 CEO로서 가상 프로덕션 기술을 선도하며 이야기가 스크린 위에서 구현되는 방식을 근본적으로 변화시키고 있습니다. 웨딩님은 할리우드 디지털 전환의 핵심적인 창의 리더로 자리매김해 오셨는데요. 오늘은 버추얼 프로덕션과 XR 기술을 활용한 차세대 영상 제작 인프라의 글로벌 확산 전략에 대해 이야기해 주신다고 합니다. 많은 기대가 되는데요. A.J. 웨딩님을 여러분 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
안녕하세요. That's me. Last name Wedding. It's always been hard for me. People thought that I was a wedding videographer when I was in production. So that's always been a hard thing for me. I've been involved in the production industry, film and television, for 25 years. Kind of all over the place, and always in kind of smaller roles, learning, trying to figure out where I belonged, both in production and in visual effects. And one day I had a crazy idea. And someday you guys might have this crazy idea, so I want you to think about it. And I don't want you to let anybody talk you out of it. If you really believe in something, no matter what anybody says, I want you to try to go for it. Because that's something that I did. And that's why virtual production and Orbital Studios exists. So about 5 years ago, just before the pandemic started, I had this idea. I saw The Mandalorian being made, right? We actually had a little bit of a part in it and got to go see the stage, the virtual production stage. And it was like a light went off in my head that this is the future of production. And there were so many possibilities. And I thought, wow, I just need to talk to somebody about this. So I spoke to several people who worked at ILM, and every one of them said, oh, no, it's awful. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I wondered why, because they were inventing this. It was great. And they went down the list of all of the reasons why it was difficult, why it didn't work, what problems that they had. And that was great, because all those problems sounded solvable. So I thought to myself, somebody is going to want to be a part of this. Somebody is going to want to help solve these problems. So I started reaching out to different manufacturers who made LED panels, who made tracking systems, cameras, you name it. I was interested in finding out if they wanted somebody to test this stuff and try to make it better for filmmakers. Because none of this technology, even when ILM was using it, was ever meant for this. It was all stuff that was being put together to make this amazing thing happen. And they were so busy, they didn't have time to innovate further than that. They were making TV shows. So I managed to get a couple people interested, a panel manufacturer who gave me an LED panel that I had in my garage. And you can see this was my first setup here. Let me see if I can get that to go again. And all I did was test. And all the way through the pandemic lockdown, I tested and tried to figure out, how do we make this better? And eventually it led to what Orbital Studios is today. And I'd love to show you a little bit of our work. Thank you. So virtual production is no different from regular production. Really, all you're trying to do is solve problems to make the creative work. And the playground that you get with virtual production is just a lot more massive. There's more that you can get accomplished in a small space. We started, like I said, in my garage. We moved into kind of a little bit larger studio when we started testing. And now we're in a 40,000 square foot facility with multiple stages. And we also service virtual productions worldwide. When we talk about how's it going with virtual production, the growth has been pretty staggering. And I think that a lot of that is just people learning about how it works, producers learning how to budget for it. And, globally, I think there's been a spike in productions overall. But back in Los Angeles and in the US, we're seeing kind of the lowest time we've ever seen in production. But what's kind of crazy about that is even though we're at our lowest time, Orbital has never been busier. And I think a big part of that is because these tools allow you to do so much more. And now, even though there's a smaller group of people making things, more of those groups are using virtual production. They're seeing the value in it. There's a lot of value in it, aside from cost reduction, but also carbon footprint reduction. If you look at using a virtual stage versus going to a location, you're saving almost 100% of your carbon footprint. And in a lot of places, that's a huge deal. In Los Angeles, it's obviously a huge deal. In fact, one of the first TV series that we were a part of was called Snowfall for FX. And it was a show that took place in the 1980s, and it was a big location show. It was all around LA. And after the pandemic, it was very hard to go on location. It was very difficult to get those locations approved. So I worked with the producers to figure out how can we take a third of your locations and bring them back into the stage so that at least you have a certain amount of stuff that you can count on that's going to be in the studio. And when we did that, they not only were able to make their schedule, which was difficult during the post-COVID era, but also they saved $500,000 on their budget over the season, which a lot of people look at virtual production and say, oh, it's really expensive. But in actuality, they saved money. Part of an important factor of virtual production is the pipeline. And when all of us started doing virtual production, this pipeline was a lot bigger, a lot more difficult. And because of that, there were some pretty big failures, big problems. And it really comes down to always the creative. So the earlier pipelines were based on a visual effects pipeline. And the idea there is usually you're using, regular software such as like Maya to build out these CG models and eventually put them into a real-time engine to put them on the stage. So that timeline for creating all of those assets was based on the visual effects timeline. And part of that process was the creatives are gonna have to sign off in the early stages on this is what we want it to look like, this is the lighting for it, these are the colors, these are all the aspects to it that we approve, and now you guys go make it. And there was a period of time that we call the black box, where none of the creatives get to see what's going on as this stuff is being created because it's all in different softwares, it's all living in various places in the world, and getting to look at it all at once is very difficult, or was very difficult. These new pipelines, like what we have here, they're very cyclical, circular, and transparent. So the idea here is that we always maintain a version of the virtual art department in a real-time engine. So at any time, any of the creatives want to see it, want to get involved, make some changes. You know, one of the really interesting things about making movies or TV shows is that directors, producers, their ideas multiply, right? Their creativity grows off of whatever the last idea was. And so while all of this virtual art was sitting in a black box being built, they're over here creating and making other decisions that are bigger and more exciting, and they're loving it, and the show is just turning into something amazing. And then this gets delivered and they go, ugh, that is not what I wanted it to be. Can we change it? And the answer is no, because now we have to shoot it, because now we're at the time of the shoot. And that presented such a huge problem for creatives that's why we developed this transparent pipeline, so that at any time we can have a location scout, previs, tech viz, all in the same virtual art. So we start looking at how that's done. The thing that's amazing about it is no longer do you have a separate storyboard being created, a separate production design being created, separate, everybody working in their own silos. Now we all can work in the same place. So for pre-visualization, the assets that we're using are the assets that we're building for the virtual art, or the VAD, as it says there. So this just allows for it to be a lot more efficient, and for the creative stakeholders to continually make decisions instead of having to get cut off at some point. Here's some VAD that we did very quickly for a commercial where commercials have a very short timeline, and normally virtual art has a timeline of 8 to 12 weeks if you're using one of the major companies to do it. And so one of the ways that we figured out we had to make it faster, because commercials usually have about a 2-week timeline. And if we couldn't do it in 2 weeks, we're not gonna get the job. So we figured out, hey, show us in AI like what you want. Show us how, as close as you can, what you want. And so if we go back to the beginning, you see in this upper corner, that was an AI image that was created by the filmmaker who said, I want it to look just like this. And so right away we were like, oh, that's okay, we know what that is. And so there were fewer decisions that had to be made along the way. And because of that, we were able to knock this out in a few days. Eventually, obviously, it's still very rough, but at least you get the basic idea of what they were going for from the geometry. And then from there, we can finalize it, make it better, make it look better. This is another sort of version of that, where we're working on a movie where they wanted to recreate the scene in Rocky, where he's punching the meat in the meat locker. But you can't film in a meat locker anymore because of reasons, So we were able to recreate the meat locker for them to have at it. Virtual scouting is yet another great way to use virtual art department. All of these people that you see kind of on the Zoom call there, they're all in different places. This was actually just post-COVID, so a lot of decisions were having to be made about what are we going to physically build versus what is virtual, and what does the director want to use for lenses for different shots? And everybody got to be in this meeting, and they were all over the world. And eventually, we realized that, well, the only thing we actually have to build are table and chairs and carpet, because no one's interacting with the bar. And so you see that was kind of the final look there. And it saved them a ton of money and a ton of time. So tech viz is when you take that virtual art and now say, okay, what are we going to physically build versus what's going to be digital? And so you see up in that corner over there, everything that's turning yellow, those were the things that people decided, okay, we physically need that because actors touch it, or it's in the midground, those kind of things. So again, helping to create more efficiencies in production when you're on a virtual stage. So one of the biggest things that probably changed my future was the ability for us to be mobile with our virtual production setups. A lot of times you see these LED volumes, and they are these massive structures that, are really good for the Mandalorian, but not everything is the Mandalorian. Not everyone's walking around in a suit of armor, and you don't always need to have something that's that large. So what we do is, on a case-by-case basis, we look at a production and say, what do you actually need? And how much time do we have to build it? And what's your budget look like? And by looking at all those factors, we can determine what they need. And in some cases, we could build out the set in a day, or 2 days. And it could only live there for maybe a week. Maybe they're only doing some car work. But it allows us to come to production instead of productions coming to our stages. That ability saves production money because, not sure how it is here, but in LA, when a production moves from their stages to a location, it costs them about $70,000 per day just to move that miniature city that is, feeding everybody and housing everybody and parking everybody. So if you can avoid that, then it saves them money. So when we start to look at some of the use cases, we talked a little bit about commercials. So this is one that we did recently for the new iPhone 17. And the way they do these commercials for the new product is they have one phone. And that phone has to go to each production that's making a commercial for it. And so if you've ever noticed the new iPhone commercial, it's always an orange phone because it's the same one. And so we really only had 2 weeks to put this together. And we managed to use a motion control robot to do a lot of the work, which helped streamline the process. And in that case, we didn't have to have real-time rendering because we were doing very specific moves. So this is something that we did for David Ayer, who was the creator, or is the creator, of Fast and Furious. It's a new series he wants to do called Lollipop. The idea behind it is, surprise, it's a racing series. But the idea is that it happens all over the world. And if you were going to take this all over the world like they do with the Fast and Furious movies, the budget would be astronomical and you would never be able to afford it. So the test case was, let's film the pilot, and even for things that it would make more sense to go outside, like you saw the police standing on the street, let's try to do all of it in the volume and see what we can get away with. Because if we could shoot 80% of the thing in a volume, it's going to save us a ton of money, and it's going to save us from having to travel and all of those things. And so we did the pilot at our stages downtown Los Angeles, and we're just waiting for the show to get picked up. So this Mercedes-Benz commercial was a really good use case for blending visual effects with virtual production. So when you have a motion tracking system in the volume that's tracking where the camera goes, accuracy is super important. There's two things with motion tracking, accuracy and latency. So you want to have as low latency and as high a tracking as you can. So what that allowed them to do is take all that tracking data from the shoot and into post very easily be able to add these layers of visual effects to the commercial. So I think probably every one of us today has to talk about AI, right? Because AI is going to change everything for everyone. I think Joel from Bento Box earlier was saying that he really wants to find the tools to do the things he wants it to do, right? He wants it to do storyboards. He wants it to do all these certain aspects, but not take over the creativity that he brings to the table or that his artists bring to the table. And I'm going to talk to him a little bit later about it, but there are a lot of tools being built. And in fact, a lot of people are building their own tools, which is something that we've been doing. So if you look at this box over here on the side over there, that is a system called Comfy UI. And what Comfy UI allows us to do is to create our own version of AI. So we're able to take different models, give them different control mechanisms, and start to make them do the things that we want them to do, but not take over the things that we don't. You know, AI is very good at a few things. It's an aggregator, and it's an average maker. So when you start talking about what does it do to create, how does it take away creativity from you, the artist? Well, it's not really going to take away creativity, because all it's doing is giving you the average of all of the things that exist based on what you've asked it to do. And if you have some control over it, then you can say, okay, that's pretty good, but I want to change this, this, and this. And you have to make it in a way where you can actually keep the things you like, but then change the things that you want to change. And that's what Comfy UI allows us to do. So that's one aspect of AI that we're using. Another is trying to make virtual art department faster. And there are ways that we can do that where we can cheat, where we call it 2.5D, where we'll create plates that are creating parallax from one to the other. That's one way to cheat. But now the new thing with AI is creating these depth passes from images or from video plates. And so you're able to take what was a video and run it through a series of tools that turn it into a 3D object. It's still a bit of a cheat. You're not going to go all the way around it, but a lot of times it's all you need for what you're trying to accomplish. So when we talk about being able to control the things you want and keep things the way that, the things that you like, keep those things. That's called training at LoRa. And at Orbital, we have a system that helps us break down scripts. So we'll get in a movie script and we'll feed it into our AI system. It will break it down into locations, characters, and props. And from there, we can create LoRas. So you have a LoRa for each character, a LoRa for each location, and a LoRa for each prop that's important. And once you train those models, all of them can work together in Comfy UI to create storyboards, which can then be animated, and you can change the cameras, and your models will stay the same. So I know a lot of people get scared about AI. In fact, in Los Angeles, it's a huge issue, especially for actors. And actors are afraid that they're going to lose their value, they're going to lose their face, their expressions. And I think that a lot of that comes out of just fear and not knowing what this powerful tool is capable of. So I want to introduce you to an actress by the name of Laura Coover. Laura has been on a lot of different television series. She was very wary of AI. She's also the head of marketing at Orbital Studios. So we wanted to give her the tools and tell her, just try them out. Do what you think you are trying to accomplish. So Laura has a short film that she wants to make. And she would star in the short film. Surprise, she's an actor. But to be able to showcase to the cinematographer, the director, the investors, what this short film is supposed to look like, how she wants all the shots to look. You know, she could try to storyboard it, but she's not an artist. She doesn't draw. So we said, look, why don't you take this and we'll teach you how to use it. So she fed a data set into Ostras and created a LoRa of Laura. And so what that allowed her to do was, instead of her chicken scratch drawings, create these amazing storyboards that really help to tell this story that she wants to get out. It helped us all to understand how it was going to work. And it made her less fearful of the tool. She sees how it's useful. Oh, wow, I can actually put myself in that, and maybe it will help me get investors for the movie, or whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. Oh, wait, before I start this one. So the other thing you can do, obviously, is straight generation. And again, artists are fearful, right? There's a man by the name of Neville Page who was the creature designer for the Avatar films, for Star Trek, for Alien, you name it. He's a pretty well-known designer. And he hadn't worked in a while because of the slowdown in Los Angeles. And he was very fearful of the tools. And so he said, all right, well, we want to put them in your hands because we want to pitch a series where you will be the host. And it's called the Museum of Wonder. So he was able to, and this is where when people say, well, it's over for artists. When I see what he's able to do with AI generation tools, and this was a year ago, versus what most people that are not artists can do, it's just a very different outcome.
We are inventors, storytellers, dreamers. Since the dawn of time, we have built, shaped, and created, not just for survival, but for the sheer joy of discovery. Everything around you, every invention, every piece of technology, every work of art started the same way, with a question, with curiosity, with wonder.
So again, when you put the tools in the hands of an artist, you realize they are tools. And if you put paintbrush in my hand, you're going to not get that. So one of the things that we're doing that I think is kind of interesting, maybe for you guys as well, is we have this thing now we call Powered by Orbital. Our artists, our technicians, our technology, and our teams are fairly small when you compare them to a company like ILM or Pixelmundo. We're not even in the same realm size-wise. But they're very smart, they're very good at what they do. And I think when a lot of virtual production stages opened up around the world, it was kind of trying to follow the model of ILM, not knowing that they had all kinds of problems. And so having to figure out how to fix all those problems and figure out how to make it work for them was difficult. And I think a lot of stages closed. Certainly in the United States, I'd say about 40% of all virtual production stages closed after the first couple of years. It's very expensive technology. It's very hard to teach people how to use it. And then if it doesn't work, sometimes, then people get turned off by it. So our whole goal is to keep virtual production alive because we see that it's the greatest thing since the green screen. And we want to help. So a couple things that we're able to do with our Powered by Orbital initiative is, one, we are represented by CAA, which is one of the largest talent agencies in the world, if not the largest. And what that does is it allows us to get scripts a lot earlier than other people. So we'll see productions before they even get financed so that we can take a look and say, this is a good candidate for virtual production, or it's not, or maybe just a little, maybe some of these driving scenes are good for virtual production. But we're in on it very early. And a lot of times they haven't decided where they're going to go to shoot the film yet. And so being able to say, oh, you know what? We have a partner in Korea who has a stage, and that would be perfect for you because of X, Y, and Z. And so we're opening up those partnerships where we can help in so many ways. One, by bringing productions. Two, by bringing our partnerships with Dell and NVIDIA, where we've developed systems that are fairly automated, that don't require as many people as, say, an ILM virtual volume does. In fact, most of our virtual productions have 3 operators. So it's very different from the 30 that you get in a larger scale production. And then we have backup, right? So we have a huge data center at our facility in Los Angeles where we can remote into the systems anywhere in the world and operate them from there. We can diagnose problems, both from a technical perspective with the LEDs or with the tracking system or with the virtual art. Though usually if we've been involved in the virtual art from the beginning, we minimize those problems as much as possible. So the neat thing that I wasn't going to announce till next week, but when I got invited here, I thought, you know what? I'll tell you guys first, is that we have our first partner, which is a studio in Budapest called United Illusions. And so what we do for United Illusions, we've gone there, we've trained their staff, we've also trained anybody who was interested in being a contractor for when they have overflow needs. We bring productions to them as well. And we're just there as a partner. We're there, you know, for us as a mobile studio, it's great when we can bring all of our equipment everywhere we go, but it's not always feasible. You know, for us to go to Europe or to go to Korea and ship a whole bunch of LED panels, it just doesn't make any sense. So building up these partnerships really helps us to maintain the level of quality of virtual production around the world without having to have a physical presence. So what's next with virtual production? It's getting so much better, right? I don't know if you've seen the latest things from Unreal Engine or Chaos Arena, which is a real-time render engine as well. We're also testing something from the Foundry, who are the makers of Nuke, called Nuke Stage, which is a really interesting program. There's a lot of new players in the game that are helping solve problems, which is really what we love at Orbital. You know, we always want to solve the problems and make this stuff so much easier. As you saw, we're building AI tools. Pretty much every version of software that we like, that we have problems with, we're just building a new version or building a patch for it. We have several patches for Unreal Engine that help us a lot. And animation pipelines, much like what Joel was talking about earlier, he's more in kind of the 2D animation side of it. We've been building out a 3D animation pipeline that allows actors to essentially act on a stage. And we record the performance almost like a play, like a theater play. And from there, we're able to direct it in post and have it be a full animation, 3D animation that is coming. We will also have some new partnerships. We actually just signed a deal with Cinespace, which has stages globally. We are now their preferred vendor for virtual production, and we will be parking a bunch of gear in Europe for them. Remote support, which is something we already talked about. Has anybody ever heard the term Gaussian splats? Yeah? Okay. Neural radiance fields, maybe? NERFs? Okay, great. Sometimes I say those words and people are like, huh? So Gaussian splats are the future of virtual production as far as it gaining momentum, because very quickly you can get to something that looks photoreal. Instead of having to build something in game engine, if it's for a TV show where they just don't have the time for that. We've done several TV shows. We actually just wrapped one for Netflix called Nemesis. And it was a really interesting use case where They were going to go out on location in downtown Los Angeles and film a shootout in the middle of the streets. So they were going to have to close down the streets. And the way it works in Los Angeles is if you're going to do that, you can only shoot for 2 days. They don't want things closed down for more than that. So I thought to myself, there's no way they're going to get this scene in 2 days. It's supposed to be this huge thing. It's the biggest thing in their season. So I said, how about this? How about we'll go there with you, and we will scan the entire place. We will do a Gaussian splat of it, and you guys get all the wide shots, and then we'll come back to the stage and we'll shoot all of the tighter shots. And they said, that sounds really cool. Nah. I was like, I don't know. You can lead a horse to water, I guess. But we did it anyway. So we went and we did it because it didn't cost us anything to be there. So this is not the splat, but this is a Gaussian splat. To kind of show you, something like this probably took about an hour to do. So if you're on a production that's on location, you can do it at lunch. And you process it, you put it into Unreal Engine or another game engine, and you're able to use it. Now, one of the biggest issues with it right now is that the performance isn't quite there yet. So, in order for virtual production to work, whatever is on the LED wall has to run at the same speed as the camera. Otherwise, it's going to look like jittery. And these Gaussian splats are running at around 12 frames a second. So it doesn't really work, especially if for us, we're trying to be at 24. But we started working with, as we do, the people that are making these things and making the software for them. So we started working with Valinga, who has a plugin for Unreal for making Gaussian splats work. And they've started to try to figure out what parts of the GPUs, the computers, are actually being used so that we can figure out how to optimize and make that work. And in some of our early tests with them, this is on our stage in one of our stages downtown LA, we started to get to a point where we're actually hitting our 24 frame minimum. And that's still kind of early in the process, but very soon we're going to be where these are going to be very valuable. And especially with some of the things coming out, like the X-Grids portal cam, being able to walk around and grab a Gaussian splat of something is going to be the easiest thing to do. And that's about it for me. So thank you very much. 감사합니다.